Hello to everyone online and a very warm welcome to our webinar, Building a Sales Insight Engine. My name is Andrew Freeman and I'm CEO of CRMT. For those of you who don't know us, we're a hybrid marketing consultancy and agency and we help our customers scale their marketing organizations efficiently globally, what we call global enablement. And then in addition, we use that infrastructure to engage, help them engage with their customers and prospects intelligently, generally using a sort of data-driven approach, and we call this smart engagement. I'd like to welcome our speaker today, Julian Archer, who is VP and Principal Analyst at SiriusDecisions, who are now part of Forrester, and our Business Development Director, Joanna Mills. We're hoping to have at least 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. So if you do have questions whilst you're listening online, then please do type them into the box, and we'll try and get through as many of them at the end as we can. If there are any left over, we'll make sure we follow up with you individually so that you get your answers. Okay, without further ado, let me hand over to Julian, who's going to introduce us to the concept of the SiriusDecisions 360-degree view of the buyer, and why it is a critical component of building a sales insight engine. Over to you, Julian.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm going to talk about the 360-degree view of the buyer. I thought I'd start with actually a definition, and there it is right in front of you, how we see what we mean by 360-degree. Too often people say, yeah, I want all the data I can possibly have about a customer. I want the 360-degree view. Well, we intuitively know that's a good thing, don't we? But actually, we need to have a definition of what it actually is. So there it is for you. We see it as a set of data concerning prospect and customer entities that is required to effectively carry out both the acquisition, the retention, and the growth of the activities we try to achieve with our customers. Now, to be able to arrive at this, there are really three steps we need to go through. We need to prioritize the business scenarios, i.e. fully understand what data elements we actually need. So rather than just saying we want all data, let's be specific about the data elements we need. In the second place, we need to identify where we're going to find that data. Where are the sources of that data? And once we've done that, we really need to be able to bring that data together in a unified format so that we can use it effectively. So really select a basic and good unification approach. So that's what I intend to go through with you today, the prioritization, identification of sources, and also the unification of that data. So let's start with the prioritization first. Now, how do we know what data we actually want? Well, if we think about it, fundamentally, we're trying to target our market, understand what our market is. We're trying to identify those people who are in market. We're trying to devise tactics, and we need data to drive those tactics to reach those buyers in that buying group. We need to prioritize the people who are responding to us. We need to go through a sales cycle. And yes, once we've got the customer, we need to onboard that customer and drive eventually something like customer advocacy. So consequently, this is a great basis upon which we can say, you know what, we need data at every stage of this entire cycle to drive a better business approach for our own sales and marketing people. And we can think to ourselves, we need the data to do that. And what are the data elements? Well, here's some examples. We can start putting in and really identifying those elements, and we're agreeing between sales and marketing and teller. And fundamentally, to be able to get the 360-degree view of the buyer, we actually need to identify these data elements. Now, look, these are all just examples I'm giving you in front of you, but they are really a way of organizing and sorting out your thoughts of what elements you need for each stage of the buyer's journey and the customer life cycle. But that's sadly at the moment all that they are. They are actually just data elements. We need to be more granular in our view and understand in more detail what those data elements actually constitute. And to do that, what we do is break it down into the constituent parts of, are they account elements? Are they buying center? Are they what we call buying group? Or actually, are they contacts? Now, contacts you all understand, no problem. Account, Well, we have to determine whether you mean the account that the salesperson recognizes. Is it the legal entity? You have to be really clear about what you mean by an account. The buying center is pretty clear, and for most times it's the function or the department or the business unit that actually has the need that you're trying to satisfy. The buying group are the individuals who come together on behalf of that buying center to actually purchase or solve a problem that that buying center has. So in a sales and marketing environment, we're very keen to understand the whole buying group and its members rather than just the individual. So we take the data elements that we actually need and break these down into these 4 constituent parts to, again, give a better clarity and better understanding to help us understand what type of data we actually are looking for. So that's great. Hey, we've got more granular. But I'm afraid we need to go even further. We need to go one step further and say, you know what? All these great data points, we can know by the magic of PowerPoint, I've managed to put them into nice categories. But actually, the way we go deeper than that is to say, you know what? We need to differentiate between profile data, which is that data that describes and defines the target. It generally is the type of data that won't change very much on a regular basis. My name, for example, won't change very in a short space of time. My name will stay pretty constant. And we can do that at the account level, the buying center level, the group level, and the contact level. So you can see we're getting to get more granular about what data elements and how to sort and categorize this data. If I look at activity data, if I download a white paper, hey, I'm giving an activity. So that's important information. I may be able to tell you my buying needs by understanding what type of data or white papers I'm downloading. But you can imagine also that there's activity data at the account level. For example, credit ratings or reports, for example. In regular financial reports are examples of account activity data. Think also there's activity data at the buying center and the buying group level. Fundamentally, we're getting more and more granular and more understanding of the type of data that we need. And the more we can do that, the easier it is for us to sort our databases, to become granular, and to be sure that what data the sales team needs, what your marketing team needs in terms of the data they need to drive their campaigns, is being delivered by your data stewards and your marketing operations folks. The last category is the derived data. And that's really where you're putting your intelligence. You're either normalizing data or you're bringing in your expertise to say, you know what, if this person has this title, we're going to think this person is this level in the organization. You are deriving some insights, some information from your profile and activity data. And all this together will help us identify truly the data we need to drive that 360-degree view of the buyer. So that's great. We've got that now all ticked off. We can say, fantastic. We now have a clear idea of what data we need, how to sort it, and how to categorize it. Of course, the next question is, where do I get that data from? I need to identify the various sources that I can have. Now, quite simply, we can see here the most common are on the left-hand side here. Most organizations have a marketing automation platform, a Salesforce automation. These are the core marketing technologies that we use day in, day out in our own sales and marketing businesses. Think also of event management systems, the way you collect contact data and account data at events. So you have access to those on a very, very regular basis. As an organization, as a marketing and sales function, you can have extended technologies. Maybe you're using first-party predictive analytics, for example. You may be looking at content asset management systems. So the extended view, if you will, of the systems available to you. But don't forget to think about all your internal systems to your company that are not directly under the responsibility of sales and marketing. Your customer billing, your customer support. Time and again, we hear from organizations that their customer support databases are far more accurate and up to date than their marketing or sales automation systems. So think about how you're going to bring all that data from the other technologies into your area so that you can control some data and use the insight there. Now, the fourth area, of course, is what we all know in terms of external data. Data providers, data orchestration providers, but also, of course, third-party monitoring data, predictive analytics type of stuff. The point being that once you've got from the first stage the idea of how and what data I actually need, this is an important step to be able to identify the sources that you need to go to and validate teams. So far, so good. We've identified what we need, and we've identified, therefore, how and where we're going to get this data. But once we've got the data, we need to bring it together into a format and structure, both normalized and co-located, that we can use it for our campaigns, that we can use it to drive better engagement with our prospects and buyers and customers. We need to select the optimal data unification approach. Now, we actually see 4 major types of unification, which we can talk about at length. The first one is actually no data unification at all. It's basically, if you look on the y-axis, the level of normalization required of the data to bring it together, and the x-axis of the co-location, we can see that there are organizations still today that keep their marketing automation separate from the Salesforce, and sales say, get your hands off my Salesforce automation system. That's not really unification. There's nothing there. A very common approach to unification is the top left, where we see point-to-point synchronization with, say, an MAP system and a Salesforce automation system. Now, that could be direct, point-to-point within your own organization. It might be that you use an external provider, an orchestration provider, for example, that does the synchronization for you and provides enriched data. But fundamentally, you're using a typical Salesforce automation platform as your basis of your unification to provide you with that golden record. The bottom right is really where we see time and again individual systems being managed, and there could be an intelligence layer on top of all that, which draws out the data from these various point systems and gives you better reports, better understanding, and they're really good. The problem sometimes there is, of course, that you're not, that insight that you've gained, you're not pushing it back into the source systems. And the top right, the more complex, is the master management, is maybe nowadays customer data platforms, where you are really having a bi-directional flow between the various systems and the hub system. So there are these approaches to data unification, and you need to find and choose which one is best for you. To help you do that, we see really some pros and cons of each of the various strategies. Within the existing systems, we see, people understand the Salesforce automation approach. They are many times users of that system. There's low incremental cost. You're using it anyway. The implementation of synchronization is not as complex, so therefore the speed to value is somewhat quicker. The problem is that the Salesforce automation system was not designed as a master data management system. It's not designed as a data unification system. So really you're sometimes shoehorning it in. But look, if you have limited scope and budget, that is certainly something that many people opt to do. The master data management system, it's great if you do have standard and normalized data. That's really good. But of course, it does have time and effort costs to it as well, and it does have synchronization complexity between the multiple systems you have and then the bi-directional flow. You possibly also find that you need inside your own organization some extensive tech skills as well. The data integration approach on the right-hand side is great for flexible expansion. So if you can add in another system and you can just draw the data from that system, that's okay. You're using a BI tool as integration. But as I say, what it does have is a negative in terms of you're not updating those systems. So each has its own pros and cons, but they are all approaches to bringing you better insight that you need to drive that 360-degree view of the customer. Now, you may think that the smaller organizations are the one doing the existing systems, using the Salesforce automation as the appropriate way, and the bigger companies are all using master data management or data aggregation. Well, actually, from our research, we see some different thoughts. There is actually a slight tendency for all organizations of all sizes to use the existing systems, to use the synchronization, for example, between the point systems. Yes, the 36% are using master management, and 19% are using data aggregation. So it's interesting that the most popular by a small amount is the existing systems. And just to show you, if you will, the breakdown there of the revenue band of size of organization using this unification approach. Yes, in the middle there, between $251 million to $750 million, we're seeing a preponderance of using the existing systems. But actually, even at the above 10 billion, the really, really big companies, it's actually pretty much even about who's using which type of approach to unification. So I thought they were interesting data points to share with you today. So what I've been through with you quite quickly today is, rather than just saying, yes, I want more data from my prospects, more data, I need more and more. No, you don't. You need to have an understanding of what data it is you need to drive a particular business scenario. And I chose the scenario from your target market through marketing qualification to sales to customer advocacy. Understand what data elements you need for you to be able to do that job better. You're identifying the sources of that information, either inside your own function, inside sales, inside marketing, or the wider organization, or external sources. And then you're determining which is the best unification approach for your organization to make sure that you can use that data, use that insight, and therefore gain all the benefits of having that amazing 360-degree view of the client. So that was me in a nutshell. I'm obviously going to ask lots of questions. I hope you ask lots of questions at the end. But with that, I'd like to hand you back to Joanna to take it forward. Joanna?
Great, thanks, Julian. So Julian talked about some of the data unification strategies and how to build up a 360 view of the buyer without necessarily needing to invest in new technology. So I'd now like to dig down into a little bit of detail and talk about the steps to building a sales insight engine, leveraging the data aggregation and the existing systems technology. I will then hand back to Andrew to finish up with some questions. So for those of you who don't know CRMT, we've grown up with the database marketing and the marketing automation industry turning 20 this year. And over those years, data has always been part of our lifeblood and a really core part of our service offering. And we've helped many of our customers improve the quality of their data and aggregate it to then design, run, and build their own insight engines. So let me talk a bit about what we mean by a sales insight engine to begin with. So the primary purpose of an engine like this is to provide sales with valuable account insights to enable more relevant and meaningful conversations with their prospects and customers. And for marketing, it provides them with data around the effectiveness of their marketing channels and tactics. Now, for many organizations, improving seller productivity is a key driver for profitable business growth. But in order to do this, a joint and sales marketing initiative is required in order to focus the sales teams on target accounts and critically those that are actively researching your products and your solutions. And this could be across both third-party and internally owned platforms, of course. But in order to achieve a visualization of engagements across all channels at an account level and in a single dashboard, you need to synthesize the data to provide insights that will allow sales and marketing to proactively target these individuals within the active accounts and then determine which accounts are moving from passive to active over time. Now, as I'm sure has been the experience of many of you listening today, where there are insights, there is data, and where there is data, there is often a dilemma of sorts. Now, in this case, the dilemma our clients have experienced is that data is quite often not in a reasonable state of cleanliness or aggregated up to an account level. Now, both of those are requirements to enable the kind of insights that you need to understand which accounts are active and, of course, how to target them. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about some of the steps involved in that process and some of the things to take away and think about at each of these steps. So this is a matrix that we've drawn up to map out your marketing channels and the technologies that support those channels using an existing client example. And the purpose of this matrix is first and foremost to understand which platforms you have in your MarTech stack and what type of data is available within those platforms. Now, that could be contact level data, it could be account level data, and it could contain PII. And you'll need to know each of those areas when you come to aggregating the data up to an account level in the next step. It's also really key to understand how these technologies are integrated so that you can determine whether there's a single source of truth and whether all of your engagement data is stored in one place. And of course, if this doesn't exist, then you'll know where you need to build integrations to support that requirement. And often overlooked at this stage is whether or not your team has access to the different technologies. So, for example, if you're in a regional team and you know that the technology is owned by your corporate headquarters, there may be some work to do to ensure that you have access to the right data. Now, it's really important to understand that up front. Otherwise, you may find that there's a convoluted process in order to get access, which could cause a delay in terms of any project plans and timings that you've set out. So while on the surface, I appreciate this probably seems like quite a simple matrix, but in our experience, until you actually go through this process, quite often organisations don't understand some of these key factors. And of course, they're critical to the success of any initiative like that. So it is a really important planning step that you need to do up front. It's also a good point to ask yourself what information your sales team are going to ask for, so you can determine whether or not the data sources that you have available to you are going to answer those questions. So now you understand where the data resides and the type of data that's available to you. The next step is to bring all of the lovely data into a single place and aggregate it up to an account level if it's not already in that state. But before you can do that, it's very likely that there'll be an exercise required to dedupe, clean or normalize the data, as Julian said. And critically in this kind of initiative, it's the account names that really need to be normalized so that you only have one version of each account. So, for example, you want to ensure that all of your data is rolled up to IBM rather than some of it rolling up to I.B.M or IBM Technologies. And this kind of work is something that's required to enable best practice marketing segmentation anyway. And it's something that you'll need to do whichever data unification strategy you choose to employ. So you could look at this as a good opportunity to do some of this work. Now, at this stage, it's also really important to be single-minded and not become blinded by the data that's available to you, so that you can really work out which sources are actually relevant to you. So just a couple of things to watch out for as you're going through this process. So any columns in data tables do need to have the same format, otherwise the data won't join together. And when you're thinking about your data cleansing steps, do make sure that they're scalable and automated as much as possible, so you don't have to repeat the same exercise in 6 months' time. Let's face it, nobody wants to go through that exercise more than once. And finally, make sure that you use a naming convention so that you don't end up confused later down the line and wondering which fields contain which particular data points. So now the data is aggregated, you can, via the integrations between your selected data sources and BI, start building out dashboards and visualizations. And ultimately, the aim of these visualizations is to provide insight into which accounts are moving from passive to active, over what time frame, and importantly, understanding what actually triggers them to become active. So let's have a look at an example of what can be achieved with BI in terms of visualizations. So this is an example of a dashboard that we've built for an existing client in Domo, and actually uses Eloqua as the data source, which was an existing system in the client stack. We've also started using this method and these visualizations with our own data as well here at CRM2. So just a couple of key highlights to call out. So it's possible in the screenshot that's scrolling to see a timeline of engagements across all of the marketing channels and how that changes over time. Now you can see this both at an individual account level and as a comparison between accounts. So you can see which accounts are surging and which accounts are more active and how that trend changes over time. You can also drill down into each of the different engagement types by channel. So, for example, you can see event attendances, you can see which emails have been clicked on, and when contacts are engaging with your syndicated content. Now, providing the contacts that are engaging with your content are known and you have the cookie association set up, it's actually possible to identify to understand what's going on at the account and to really understand at an individual level who's engaging and with what. So now we've looked at this example, I'd like to talk a bit about how you can use these insights in practice. And this diagram shows how engagement data from your marketing channels feeds the data aggregation layer. Now, this was built in MAP for the client example, but it's not necessarily the best option to use. It really depends on whether you're in the market to invest in new technology, like a CDP, for example. But Eloquent worked well in this case because it gave us the flexibility to do with the data what we needed to. So the marketing channels feed into the data aggregation layer, which then feeds into the BI layer. So it's important at this stage, if you can, to automate the refresh cycle so that the account lists are kept up to date and the dashboard shows data in real time. So these insights will help you to make informed decisions on the next best action. And that could be a package handover to sales, for example, or it could be perhaps that you want to invest in some bespoke agile activity for your tier 1 accounts. And you may want to push some of the lower tiered accounts down into your automated always on activity in marketing automation. So any engagement that comes out of these next best actions then feeds the data aggregation layer. So you end up pushing more and more insight through the dashboard. So it does become somewhat a sort of cyclical process. So how do you align with sales to feed in some of these insights and see real value from them? And in our experience, one of the main barriers to success of any joint marketing and sales initiative is ensuring the credibility and belief in the data. And often we find that sales teams can be suspicious of data that comes from marketing, and as such, they want to understand how it's derived. So the insights in this engine enable you, as you saw in one of the previous slides, to drill down into that kind of level of granularity. And in our experience, that helps sales teams to overcome that sort of particular objection. So while this is a really powerful sales enablement tool, I appreciate there's no one-size-fits-all in terms of how it's used in practice. For example, would you choose to provide access to your sales teams? I think that's really a question that can only be answered by your organisation, and one that will depend largely on how mature your sales function is. Now, often we find that identifying advocates in the sales teams really helps with adoption. I think it's human nature, really. If your peers are finding value in using something, then you're probably more likely to investigate it and hopefully adopt it yourself. So really try and sort of seek out those champions in the sales organisation that are going to make a big deal about this new solution that marketing is providing, as that should really help with adoption rates. So now you've invested in this sales insight engine, what are the sort of outcomes that you should be aiming for? So firstly and foremost, handovers for sales should now be prioritised and personalised based on the insights that are now available to you in the dashboard. And the focus, therefore, should really be on business outcomes, and you should be able to use some of the key insights in the dashboard to help you to make decisions about how to achieve those outcomes. And folks, it's 2020, believe it or not, And segmentation and personalization has never been more of an expected way of your prospects and customers receiving marketing communications. So really make the most of the insights that are available to you to enable that personalization and make the most efficient use of your budget. And finally, the opportunity to develop large account pipeline is always going to be easier if you understand what's going on in the account. So really make the most of those insights to help you to develop that pipeline. Okay, so to finish up, I wanted to share a quote from John Major of Aruba Networks in respect of the work we've done to build out a sales insight engine. So John said, with the marketing and sales insight engine, we can now highly personalize the approach to targeting our top 1,500 accounts. This in turn means that we can use micro-segmentation and utilize our marketing dollars more efficiently and with a specific focus. So pretty compelling quote there from John. And really that concludes the content element of the webinar. So thank you everybody for listening. I hope it's been insightful. I will now hand back to Andrew to field any questions that may have arisen during the session.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joanna, and thank you, Julian, for your discussion earlier. Yeah, I've been collating questions in the background. If you haven't already, please type your questions into the question box, and we'll answer as many as we can over the next 15 minutes or so. I've kind of merged a couple of questions here for you, Julian, but there's that term 360 degree view of the customer, or 360 degree view of the buyer, I guess, has been around as a term for quite a number of years now. I remember hearing it a while back. So do you still see that as a major challenge in businesses, sort of given the invention of what you mentioned, data warehouses, customer data platforms, DMPs, etc., that kind of thing?
I still see it as, people talk about it as though it's their wish, it's their desire. I do see when I ask the questions to my clients, I say, okay, so what do you mean? What data do you need? Then the sort of the question marks start appearing. And it's this discipline and rigor and boring sort of governance that people find tedious. That's when all of a sudden we find that people start, having problems. So it's not that the issue is it's been there, we know the value, and as Joanne's just been saying, the idea of personalization, people expect this now. That's what they want. So we need to have it. And so people are recognizing that in order to have that level of personalization and focus and relevance in their engagement with the buyers, they need to get to the granularity I've been talking about. It's just doing the donkey work up front in terms of, do I have normalized data? Do I know what I want? Have I agreed with sales and marketing and gone through the rigmarole of asking my internal customers that they are the data consumers, what they want and what quality of field do they expect? That's still causing an issue for most organizations. So it's not the fact that the term is new. It's actually the governance we're seeing. People are beginning to realize they need to do this in order to deliver the personalization that Joe was discussing.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. A follow-on question, I guess, to you as well, Julian. You mentioned customer data platforms in your talk as well. Do you feel they're a worthwhile investment now? Have they matured sufficiently? What's your view of?
Okay, I'm not going to be a salesperson for a CDP vendor. I would just say that ask yourself why you're wanting to invest in them. I think there has been a lot of development and they have made steps forward. There are even B2B specific vendors that are worth mentioning. What I would say though is, again, ask yourself what it is you want to achieve. Because I've had many clients who say, well, my data is not very good, therefore I'm going to invest in a CDP. And that's the wrong answer. That's the wrong question, because actually you still have to go through the process of the rigor I've just been discussing. We, in our implementation process within SiriusDecisions, we have actually a 7-step process. And step 5 is the unification of the data. So there are 4 other steps you have to do before this in terms of what's your governance process? Do you know what the customer wants? Do you know what data you currently have? All these questions require answers. And so whilst I think CDPs are certainly interesting and any technology that can give us better control or better segmentation and access to insightful data that we can use is all well and good, it's what's your current processes up front, your governance, the discipline, that will never go away without or with a CDP.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. And Joe, just to give you a rest, Julian, you mentioned that I think in this particular instance, we used the marketing automation system to aggregate the data, which I guess is unusual, up to sort of account level. Can you expand on why we did this, I guess, and how we did this?
Sure, yeah. So in this case, we used Eloqua because all of the data was available in Eloqua via the integrations with the relevant data sources. And of course, Eloqua was an existing system within the client's tech stack, so it also meant that there wasn't a requirement to invest in new technology. And in this example, Eloqua actually worked quite well because our own technology to normalize the account data using domain names. And we were actually able to store that account level data in Eloqua. So it worked quite well from us from that point of view. So as you can imagine, there were some programs running in the background that we built to join the data together and to make sure that it's all rolled up to account level. So there are other solutions that you could use, CDPs, being one of them, as Julian said. It really depends on what's available within your existing stack and whether you're in the market for investment in new technology.
So I think a very similar question coming around that as well has been the BI side of things and the tools that you use. I think you mentioned it was Domo that again was used for this particular example. Is there any reason why it has to be Domo? Can it be done with Tableau, for example?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the principles of what we talk about here is fairly generic and can be applied to most, if not all, technology stacks. Again, similar to the decision to use Eloqua, Domo was a platform that was available within this client's existing stack, and the integration with Eloqua was already set up, so it made sense to use that. That said, if you did have other technologies in your stack, so for example, if you were using Marketo or Pardot with maybe a Tableau or a Power BI solution, then you could build something in much the same way. So it's fairly agnostic in terms of the technologies required.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I just add there, Andrew? I think it's important that in the presentation I gave, I pointed out that really that people are looking for practical, pragmatic solutions, and it's not just the big boys going for the CDPs. It's people are looking at the technology stack and what they currently have, the Salesforce automation. So it was interesting from the data we had that I say the slight majority of organizations we see do actually use existing technology. They know it's not ideally built for that, but actually it does do the job that they are looking for within the technology skill set they have and the resources they have available.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I guess I'm not sure who to ask this one to, so maybe I'll open it up to both of you, but sales or my sales generally have a mistrust of data that comes from marketing. I think we've seen that, haven't we? Any tips and tricks in getting sales on board with this? Because I guess similar projects have failed in the past just because of that alignment piece between marketing and sales. But any tips and tricks?
Sure, I'll take the first response to that, if that's all right with you, Julian.
Of course.
So really, I would say don't underestimate the change management aspect of any initiative like this. And really try and use specific examples of perhaps an account that the sales rep is interested in progressing, and show some data points that are going to help with that conversation and to help with progressing the opportunity. And what we found as well is actually running campaigns while you're launching an initiative like this, to talk about some of these benefits and some of the reasons that the team should invest their time in understanding how this works. And just on top of that, make sure that you do seek out those champions within the sales organisations, the people that you think are going to be receptive and see value. And of course, socialise and celebrate any successes that sales have had. And hopefully you'll see a sort of domino effect happen when you take that kind of approach. So that would be my advice.
Okay. I see it from the, if you like, the point of view, first of all, the exercise I said at the very beginning of the presentation around working with sales and marketing to understand what data they require, i.e. the actual fields, the quality of that data, what is critical to quality. So involving sales in that discussion, treating them truly as a data consumer. They are your internal customer. So that gets you to know what data they want. When it comes to passing more information about leads and about trying to grow the business, of course I'm going to come back to, as you'd expect me to, in terms of service level agreements and understanding what it is you actually want. But I think also nowadays, with the advent of things like 360-degree view of the customers, with the technology and the solutions that we're talking about today, I do see that marketing can offer more than just an individual lead. I think the concept of the buying group is something that's really important for modern marketers, because you're not just, in a B2B environment, it's not just a single person and a single lead who's going to make the buying decision. It's a group of people. So the technology is available now, like as we've discussed, that can help you understand the combination, the buying group members, if you will, the people who are all involved in that buying decision. And the more we can do in terms of marketing to deliver insight into the buying group rather than the individual, and avoid what we classify in SiriusDecisions as second class, or the buyer the second lead syndrome. Namely, I've given you one lead, I've got 5 other people interested, but you've already disqualified all them because you think you've just got the one. No, we have to think about the buying group and the multiple people who make up that buying group, and we in marketing can deliver that insight, and that's far more valuable to sales than just an individual lead, for example.
Yeah, brilliant. I think that is probably it in terms of questions. So thank you both for your insight, and thanks for joining us, everyone online. Please do get in contact with us if you need help with your sales insight engine, or if you just want to explore some of the concepts that we've talked about at high level in a bit more detail. Otherwise, just leaves me to say thanks again to the speakers, and everyone have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.